Hello, it's good to have you join us today. I'm Debbie Gilbert. I am the founder of IGOT Communities and currently working on my PhD in counseling, and, education, and supervision. I do a lot of mental health work, and one of the reasons why I wanted to form IGOT Communities is because senior adults are one of the fastest growing populations in our country, and they're one of the most underserved populations that we have. From time to time, senior adults will call me for counseling, and unfortunately, when you're 65 and older, most people have Medicare, and Medicare does not pay for behavioral health or counseling. If you have a Medicare rider, in some cases, that will pay for behavioral health. So using this platform, we do not consider this counseling, but more support, community support, and education. So today I'm going to talk about the dangers of loneliness for the aging. I will share my PowerPoint, and you'll be able to follow along with some of the slides. So just a second, and I'll share my screen with you, and we'll just get right into this. So go ahead and get ready to do this, and we will look from a full format. So loneliness, understanding the dangers of loneliness to senior adults or in senior adults. Senior adult, the population actually is again, one of the most rapidly growing populations in the United States and in the world. People are living longer than they ever had before. And loneliness is a universal phenomenon. Loneliness can happen in early childhood. It can happen in adolescence, in your middle life, and then as you age. Everyone from time to time can feel a degree of loneliness as they go through life. So the biggest disease known to mankind is loneliness. And certainly it's a disease, and it is the underlying cause actually of many other physical, emotional, and spiritual illnesses that people encounter today. So feelings of loneliness, depression, and social isolation are all key risk factors to seniors who are trying to age successfully. And as we begin to look at the causes of loneliness, for the aging, one of the biggest causes of loneliness is the loss of a spouse. For many people who are senior adults today, their early marriages, many at the age of 15, 16, 17, up into the early 20s, have found them with someone that they spent more time than they did with their biological families. They built their families together. They built their career lives together. They built their financial stability together. And when you lose someone who every day you've been with for, let's say, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and even 2 years, even for a short while, and they're gone, all of a sudden you wake up with this deep feeling of what now? It's not ever going to be the way it used to be. And so it can be fearful and it can be lonely. Loss of family and friends. And when we think about the loss of family and friends, you can lose a parent, or you could lose a sibling, or your children might move to a different area because jobs change frequently in this economy today, and our children move away. Loss of family and friends also come through drug addiction. Your children you may have raised them all your life, and here you are now, an adult, and your children are adults, and let's just say that they've invested in the drug world, and now they're there, but it's like they're gone. They're not who they once were. And so the drug effects of drugs today has caused loss. So there's many ways that we lose family and friends. Divorce is a major loss. Many people believe that it's easier to go through separation of a loved one through death rather than separation through divorce, because when the person's still living, there's this unfulfilled hope that maybe, just maybe, there could be a reconciliation. But it's a deep cause of loneliness today. Illness. You may have, well, going back to retirement first, let's say you've worked in your job, you've been in a job for 25, 30 years, you've built a family just even within that career life, and you retire. And all of a sudden you were going, let's say, to a factory, and it was your job to fill the pastries at the donut place or at the factory. And you had an important job. Somebody was counting on you. But when you retire and you come home, you lose that group of people, that little sphere of influence that you had, and people that really played a role in your life. And so with retirement, people often think this is going to be great. We're going to travel. We're going to do things. And it just simply doesn't always work out that way. You know, it's fun to travel, but that costs a lot of money. And so you may travel initially, but then you don't have the money to do the things that you hoped you once could. Illness, loss of feeling able actually to participate in things that were once meaningful. So when you, even like for myself, I suffer with rheumatoid arthritis, and I have lots of pain, and my joints don't function the same way. I can't walk the way I used to. It's hard to go. I used to love to work out in the yard, and you know, I would do all kinds of very physical activities in my yard and could lift, and I can't do those anymore. And so that brings about a sadness to me, because I'm not able to do the things that I once was. And so that can make me feel lonely. Loss of independence. As we age, sometimes our eyesight gets bad, and sometimes our memory gets bad. And so maybe we've lost the ability to be able to take ourselves places that we used to could go, and we lose our independence. It may be that we have always lived on a family farm, and now we have moved into an assisted living space. And so there's ways that we lose our independence, and that can lead to loneliness. And then one of the biggest things that lead to loneliness is isolation. And isolation, we do know that when one isolates themselves for 2 to 3 weeks, we know that there is an increase in their depression levels, in their anxiety. We also know that when you lose your physical health, then and you're on medications, you can have more depression and anxiety. If you have a heart attack and you're on particular medications, you can feel more depressed. So then you will begin to isolate, and you have too much time alone. And when you have a lot of time alone, even if your joints and your knees and your feet and your legs are not working the way they used to, or you have arthritis in your hands and you can't use your hands the way you used to, the one thing that doesn't stop working is the mind. And you can begin to rapid cycle with many, many thoughts. And just so you understand that the brain, left to itself, defaults to negativity. We have to make ourselves have positive thoughts. Left to itself, we will default to negative thoughts. And so learning how to switch on your brain. Hello, Bunny. Can you hear me? Bunny, can you hear me? Yours is on mute. You have yours on mute. And I see you driving in the car.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay, I can hear you now. Okay, so I'm just going over, I'm talking about loneliness, and we're recording this so we can share it later. But we're just talking about the causes of isolation and the causes of loneliness. And Bunny, at any time as I'm going through this, if you want to have some input, just feel free to stop and say, hey, I want to share something. I have talked about, though, that loneliness is absolutely a universal feeling. Everybody has periods of time when they experience some loneliness. When I'm studying a topic, I go mostly by research. And so there's a lot of research regarding loneliness. And we do know that social isolation kills people. So seniors who are socially isolated from their friends and family and community organizations, they have a significantly higher risk of mortality according to proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Then other studies have shown that loneliness increases the risk of early death twice as much as obesity. Another thing that we know is that lack of exercise and isolation is the new smoking mortality. We know that smoking kills people, but what's new now is that isolation and lack of movement is now considered the new smoking, and especially for senior adults. So we know that loneliness causes dementia. Seniors who feel lonely are more likely to suffer from memory loss, dementia, and Alzheimer's. And this is according to a Dutch study that took place. In this case, it did not matter if the person was socially isolated so much as if they felt lonely. So lonely is a feeling, and you can be in a crowd of people. You could be in a crowd of 1,000 people with people laughing and sitting by you that you know, and feel very lonely in the midst of all that. Humans need meaningful social interaction, and its absence results in cognitive decline. We know that getting together just to go to lunch, we know that senior adults who travel together, we know that senior adults who play games and cards together, those are considered meaningful social interactions, and it becomes very healthy. We also know that there's some unhealthy social interaction. A lot of times things like Facebook can be a negative to loneliness, because you can scroll through there, you can you can read everybody's post, and everybody posts usually their best things, their grandchildren, the happy moments, and it may be, once that happens, rarely, but it looks like when you read it, their life is better than my life. And so understanding that local, meaningful social interaction is much more important than having 5,000 friends on Facebook, where you're not really in contact and sharing life together. Social isolation is linked to actually chronic disease. And so We often focus on whether social isolation causes chronic disease. However, the question of whether chronic disease causes social isolation is just as relevant, especially for seniors, because sometimes, and for instance, I even know this about myself because I have rheumatoid arthritis, if you don't feel like going, if your knees aren't working, or if you're in pain, lots of times you will not go and participate in social activities. And so it's almost a double-edged sword. But the answer is sickness also causes social isolation. Loneliness can cause depression. And there may be people who have worked all their lives, had wonderful career lives, been involved in church all of their life, had lots of travel time, and never been depressed. But all of a sudden, loneliness can trigger clinical depression among seniors. So aside from feeling sad, depression can cause seniors to stop taking care of their health. Honestly, because they don't feel like it. They will stop eating. They become more vulnerable in their decision making and in their thought processes. Loneliness can cause heart disease, and this is a Harvard study that says loneliness can be as high a risk factor for heart disease as smoking. And when you think about this, and then when you go back and you think about, well, I understand this, but I'm so depressed, then we have to understand the importance of getting professional help with that, the importance of getting involved, and the important thing about depression is making a commitment to yourself to take your next best step every single day. Sometimes your next best step is literally getting up and taking a shower. Sometimes your next best step is calling a friend, even though the friend's not been to visit you. The next best step may be getting outside and walking 2 times around your house. So if you want a healthy heart, research now proves that maintaining relationships and creating new healthy relationships is a great strategy. I always advise people who come to counseling, especially who are suffering depression after things like heart attacks or strokes, is you've got to move yourselves towards social interaction if you're going to fight the depression. Just medicine is only going to kind of calm the symptoms, but it's not going to take away the problem. Loneliness can also weaken your immune system. Researchers have noticed that the white blood cells in lonely people cause inflammation over long periods of time. And part of that is because when you have some inflammation, or when you're lonely, actually, you stop doing the exercise and the nutrition and the things that you actually need. So the human body, it's not designed to have a high white blood cell count for a very long period of time. And if it does, you have sustained inflammation that's been linked to everything from cancer to viral infections, autoimmune diseases, and neurological decline. And this was interesting when I studied this because RA is an autoimmune disease. And I've never really considered myself depressed. So you can have some autoimmune diseases and cancers and things and still be a very outgoing person who doesn't feel depressed or lonely. So there's always another side to every coin with that. Loneliness can cause a vulnerability in decision making and thought process making. And this makes people more at risk for scams. So I want to talk, we're going to do a whole section on scams in the very near future. But seniors are often the target of scams because they are more likely to own a home and have excellent credit. They're also not as likely as young people to take action against scammers. So in fact, they may get scammed and they just think, well, I'm glad this is all that happened, but they won't take action to actually prosecute scammers. In general, seniors were raised, especially seniors today, they were raised in an era of the 20s, 30s, 40s to be very trusting and polite. And so they're not a match for criminal thinking minds of scammers. Seniors are at the largest risk for scams. Seniors have more economic freedom than other classes in society because they've worked more years on average, and therefore scammers target them assuming that they have a lot of money to spare. When you become lonely, you may begin to search for ways to fill that loneliness. And lots of senior adults today, they're not 100% computer savvy, but they have enough technology experience to get on like Facebook. And they get on, they can get to all kinds of sites for meeting other seniors. Well, we know that loneliness can affect our decision making because we're very vulnerable. And so it can lead to all kinds of relationships then that can be very destructive and can then in fact cause a greater deal of loneliness than the person originally felt. So internet is not the safest place when you are vulnerable and when you're lonely. In 2013, and or 14, I can only imagine how this is doubled now, but over 41.2 million people in the US tried online dating sites. And this was according to the Better Business Bureau. And although some have had some positive experiences, others can get hurt and they're left very violated and even financially ruined. We know that the Federal Trade Commission reported $105 million in losses from online dating scams in 2013. So as a widow or widower, you need to be especially careful to protect yourself from such frauds. And why? Because you're a prime target for scammers who figure you're rich and that you're vulnerable. And it's, as a counselor, it's happened more times than once that people will come and they've lost thousands of dollars and they're in deep depression and their families are in shock that they would have ever been caught up in such a situation. Particularly when you're going through the grief process, we always say this is going to take anywhere from 6 months to 24 months. And, you know, forming a relationship that is too intimate or too close during that time period puts you at really risk for making decisions that can have some very hurtful ramifications in the future. So grief, 6 months to 24 months, don't make major decisions, certainly not indecisions maybe for remarriage during that time. It's just impossible to make those really good decisions. Another thing about just talking a little bit more about the internet, something to understand if you have been lonely and you've gotten yourself caught up in this, here is something that you should know, that con people can be male or female. So there can be young women or women who will find men, and you can find men who will find women who are widows or widowers. And often what they claim to do is they claim to be professional Americans. They're usually in some way temporarily living or working overseas, and a lot of them will say they're working in special forces or working for the military, or they were a professional contractor here and now they're over in the Middle East. But in fact, they're usually foreign nationals, and they concoct false identities and life stories designed to dupe lonely women and men. And so many times they will go onto the American mainstream media and they will find people who have a life going on. Some of them will even find They'll find law-abiding citizens, and they'll also find deceased people, and they will work hard to steal as much information as about them, and then they'll claim to be that person. So the big important thing to understand when you're lonely is you can't always trust your judgment, because your perception could be skewed just a little bit. And so it's easy then with calm people, because they're good at this, it's what they do, and it's good for them to tell you very convincing stories. They learn as much about you as fast as they can about what your emotional ties are, and they will then begin to work on your emotional, where you're at, where your passion's at, and they just learn to say all the things that make you feel good when you hear those things. So how can you tell whether a great guy or gal you've met online is really a professional criminal? It's not easy, because it's what they do, it's their practice, they're good at it. But the Better Business Bureau, the FBI, the FTC, and other agencies warn of some telltale signs. So let's just say you're lonely and you're talking with somebody, and he or she, whether you're a male or female, falls in love with you after just few emails. So they will tell you things like you're not like anyone they've ever met before. They'll talk to you about your captivating smile or your intelligence. They will use words like, this is destiny or fate that's brought us together. Don't worry about our age. Age is just a number. So that's one thing that they'll do. Next thing, they'll quickly suggest that you stop communicating on that website, and they will encourage you to give your personal email address, your phone. They'll begin texting. One of the biggest sources they use is an app called Hangouts, because it can't be traced. And so they want you to do this rather than using a social media site or a dating site. Very quickly, they'll learn about your personal information, and then ultimately what's going to happen next, they're going to ask for money. There will be a story about medical bills, or I heard this one guy told this lady he was going to have a brain tumor removed. They have all kinds of clever emergencies, and they will tell you to wire the money. Many of them will have you send cash money to a U.S. address using FedEx. So money requests really quickly arise. But if you've already been captivated emotionally, then you can convince yourself that this person's really real. And so, most of them work very quickly. Some take time to actually build trust before they start asking. So loneliness, we know it can come from the loss of a spouse. It can come from illness. It can come from just retiring from your job. It can come from a fallout in a family. It can come from losing a mom, a dad. It especially comes to individuals when they become the last one of everybody left in the family. So what can you do to help yourself, or what can you do to help someone that you love who is lonely? One of our first recommendations is that you join a local community or a faith-based organization, and then begin to take part in their activities. And we'll always stress from IGOT communities the importance of local groups of people. And even though your Facebook may include a lot of your local friends, anybody else can usually come on, and whether you know them or not, you may get them added. But dating sites is not the place to go, especially as you're aging. But local people, you can know them. You can know about their families. And as a mental health provider, I tell people all the time, if you get connected emotionally to someone, you need to really examine their family, because mental illness runs genetically through families. And the person you're with needs to be healthy, but their family needs to be healthy a lot of times too. And so you can understand that on a local level far greater than you can on the World Wide Web. Faith-based organizations have Bible studies, they have potlucks, they have events that they do. Get involved. Don't just go sit in a congregation or in a club, but really begin to take part in their activities. Another thing is join a gym. Many Medicare plans include silver sneakers, and that means they're going to pay for your membership in a local gym. And so we know that you need basic things not to be lonely. You need to drink enough water. You need to have good nutrition. You need to exercise. You need to have a spiritual balance in your life. And you need to be able to learn how to breathe and to help manage your anxiety. So there's join a gym and get yourself moving. Get every joint moving. Another thing you can do is volunteer or consider taking maybe a low-stress part-time job. Maybe you would like to be a greeter at Cracker Barrel or at Walmart, or maybe you would like to be a volunteer for the City of London at Levi Jackson, or whatever area you live in. Maybe you would like to volunteer at CCC. But there's all kinds. At the library, there's the hospital, there's all kinds of places that you can volunteer, but there's also places that need senior adults in low stress part-time jobs. Another way that you can help yourself or help family members is go to family events. Go to your grandchildren's sporting events, their school events, their breakfasts with grandparents, but make yourself move toward the involvement in your family. If you don't have a family, there's all kinds of ways that you can mentor other people, other people's grandchildren, but find ways to get involved every day. Another way is to get a pet. We do know from research now that pets can be emotional support animals. You can even get letters to be able to take them on the plane with you, but it's company. It's somebody that depends on you. I heard someone say the other day that I was at Advent Health talking to the chaplain, and he said, you know, the greatest resolve for loneliness is to begin to give yourself away instead of sitting home expecting someone to give something to you. And just a couple of days ago, little Miss Bethy Young passed away. She was in her 80s, maybe just 80 this year. And I had been visiting Bethy, and every time I would go, she was sitting in her recliner, and she had volunteered for her church at Calvary to write notes to encourage people. Every time I went, she would have a stack of 5 to 7 notes. She had the most amazing handwriting for an elderly person, but it's what she did. The next thing is learn a new hobby. I think her hobby was to encourage people. Another place to get new hobbies is places like your local county extension office or library. And the extension office, they have quilters groups. I just talked with somebody not long ago. They have a group for grandparents who are parenting their grandchildren, which is a much needed support group. They have stained glass making, canning, basket weaving. So there's lots of places that you can go to learn a new hobby, or now even on YouTube, you can learn to crochet by watching YouTube videos. And then finally, the last thing that you can do to help yourself is if you have been scammed, don't be ashamed, because it's happening to so many people today. And don't hide your story. Share your story with other seniors who could potentially fall victim to scammers. So I just wanted to share today with you about loneliness and how dangerous it is. Remember, it's the new smoking, and it can cause a lot of different diseases. So, so I really encourage you, if you've watched this video, to take your next best step to fight loneliness. And of course, Bunny, you've been with me the whole time you've been listening. Would you care to unmute yourself and talk about your experience or what you do to prevent loneliness in your own life? I think you're 72, am I right? I'm hoping she's going to be able to. I'm going to unmute you, Bunny. I think I can. No, it's not going to let me. Bunny. Okay. I'm not getting her. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope that as you think about your own life, that you will take your next best steps. Ah, there's Chris. Thanks for joining us, Chris. So Chris, do you want to share anything, any thoughts you have on loneliness and on IGOT community?
No, I was able to join just the last portion, so sorry for being late, but I think the comment that you made about listening to the gentleman at Advent Health and about giving yourself is super important. Even I don't, loneliness attacks at every age, and so it can attack even at a very young age. And but it's so true that you forget about how lonely you may be as you're giving yourself or your talents or your skills or just laughter to others or whatever it is that you can offer. In Betsy's example, it was writing notes to encourage. So, but I just I'm definitely taking that away from what we've heard today, and going to try to apply that also in my life.
Okay. Bunny, do you have anything you want to share today about loneliness or what you do to fight loneliness?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I would just say at this I'm at a period in my life now where I'm very busy, but I have had periods when I did have to deal with loneliness, particularly when I moved into a new community and was just alone. I didn't have any support group. And I always love to look for something new to do. I love to learn, I love to read, I love to paint, and a new hobby is just a wonderful thing at any age. And so that was coming to my mind. I think your meeting has been excellent, and I've loved it. And I'm thinking someday I may need this, even though today I'm very busy and I'm not dealing with loneliness. I remember what it's like when I have had those times, and I'm thinking I'm going to file this information away because the way the cycles of life run, I may once again be at that point, and I want to remember to not isolate myself, but to find something new I can learn about and something new I can do.
Okay, thanks, Bunny. Thanks for joining us. And we will put this recording on, and I encourage those of you who've listened to share it with other people that are going through hard times.